We are George and Candy Hawk, and this is our story. We met while working part-time jobs while we were in our senior year in high school. This was the start of a long journey into our lives. A few months after we graduated, I received my draft notice. Then I decided to enlist in the U.S. Navy. I did my basic training at the Great Lakes Training Center in Michigan, and after 12 weeks, I was headed to Charleston, South Carolina, to the Naval Weapons Station to go aboard the USS Hunley, a submarine tender. We did not like being apart, so after a few weeks, Candy flew to Charleston, and then we got married after a few weeks. About 1 year later, our daughter Tracy was born, and 18 months later, our second daughter, Carrie, came aboard. One problem with that was that when Carrie was about to be born, my ship was changing home ports and being transferred to Guam in the Southwest Pacific. I spent 1 long year in Guam before being sent home to be discharged. A couple of years later, while living in PA, Pennsylvania, our third daughter, Emily, was born. At the age of 4, Emily became very ill. We took her to the doctor, and after examining her, the doctor told us to meet her at the local hospital. We knew it was serious. From the local hospital, she was rushed to St. Christopher's Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. She was diagnosed with viral encephalitis, an inflammation of the brain. She slipped into a coma and was not expected to survive. But God had a different plan. After 3 days in a coma, Emily began to improve, and we were able to take her home after a couple of days. The doctor told us to watch her very closely because with this virus, there are many things that could show up, including minimal brain dysfunction. Our journey with mental illness was beginning.
Well, we did notice some signs with impatience and learning. Emily struggled in school and was put into the special ed program. The learning was very hard for her, and also social interactions with others was difficult. By the time Emily was into her teen years, she became easily agitated and was very disruptive at home. Trying to manage her mental illness and getting her through the educational system was quite challenging, to say the least. We decided, with the help of professionals, that she needed to be in residential placement, where she would be living, where she would be getting some individual attention. It was extremely difficult to make this move since she would be living away from home at the age of 13. The decision was tough, but we had 2 other daughters who needed us. You see, when there is one person in a family that suffers from a mental illness, it affects everyone in the house. Emily's next few years met with problems, but she managed to make it through and return home to graduate with her class at Wilson High. At the time, we were attending a small Lutheran church. We knew almost everyone in the church and were active in numerous groups and activities. We often tried to talk to our church leaders and friends about our struggles dealing with Emily's mental illness, but our church family did not understand our pain and frustration. So we began to isolate ourselves, and we stopped going to church. The prolonged stress took its toll on us, especially me, because I'm the mom and it was up to me to fix it. I began to develop some serious health problems. I was hospitalized with major anxiety attacks. While in the hospital, a doctor sat with me one night and said I needed to put the oxygen mask on myself. This is what brought us to Florida. George decided that it was time for a change. Thank God, and thank George, my partner of 52 years.
So we moved here about 6 years ago and started to search for a church. We often passed a sign on 466 that said New Covenant United Methodist Church, and since it was very close to our home, decided to attend one Sunday morning. We will never forget that morning. Pastor Harold was introducing a new director of music, Sean Pollock, and Sean was sharing his testimony of his battle with his mental challenges. We knew that this is where God wanted us to be. It was a very powerful testimony, and it said a great deal about New Covenant and how transparency is the best policy. A few years later, the Hendrons' own battle with Cameron's mental challenges was evident. They were also very transparent. Later, we learned about a support group, Hope for Hurting Parents. There we met others who shared their stories. There were many different stories, but our pain was the same. Many parents come to Hope for Hurting Parents looking for answers on how to fix their children, answers that we don't have. But what you will find is the love of God. We have felt God's presence every meeting, and what we have learned is that walking through the pain is part of the healing process. We have also witnessed many miracles in our group. We walk together sharing our stories, encouraging each other, and sharing God's love with each other. Often we say that we are the church within the church. Each week we come to have our hope tanks refilled. We remind everyone that attends that you don't have to walk this journey alone.
Well, our daughter Emily is now 44 years old. She lives in Pennsylvania, not far from her sisters, in a small apartment, works a part-time job, and is using her life lessons to help and encourage others. We are very proud of the woman that she has become. We also see how this long journey has helped Tracy and Carrie, her sisters. They've turned out to be loving, compassionate people. We believe that God has been preparing us all this time for this very purpose, to give hope to others. We now realize that Emily was our greatest teacher. We must continue the conversation on mental illness. It is an illness, and people who suffer from it often suffer alone. The good news is that it is treatable, like any other illness, like heart disease or diabetes, and we need to get rid of the stigma. In closing, I'd just like to, the passage from St. Matthew, where Jesus invites us to come to him, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Thanks be to God.
Amen.